Namaste. I have Nityanand Misra back. He is a well-known person to my audience because we did a great session on Devdutt Patnaik. But today is a far deeper topic because Robert Goldman is considered one of the icons of Western Indology, considered one of the great Sanskrit scholars in the world. He's been there for several decades in the Western Academy. His interpretations and translations are legendary within the Western academic system. And so, when someone like Nityanand finds serious errors, serious discrepancies and errors and problems in Goldman's work, it's not something casual, because his works have been checked by Western peer review system. They are published by very prestigious presses like Princeton University Press. And what Nityanand is going to show you point by point, example after example, that our publications like Gita Press are far better, far more responsible than the Western Indology publications. Am I right? This is, in a nutshell, what we are going to establish.
Yeah, so let me begin by saying how I started reading the Valmiki Ramayana. At the age of 7, I procured my first edition of the Gita Press translation, Hindi translation of Valmiki Ramayana. And that's when I started reading. So I've grown up reading the Gita Press translation in Hindi, of course, and then later I've read parts of the English translation also. And the rigor, the discipline, the reliability of the translation, I'm very used to it. So I've known Goldman's works for some time, and we've also exchanged emails, Robert Goldman and I. He's a good scholar, no doubt. He has spent a lot of time on the Ramayana. However, at the same time, I would like to say that his work is not beyond question. His work has mistakes. And I find the Gita Press translations, which are published in India, made in India, to be better, more reliable, and more true to the original. So this is based on, again, when we speak about how do you find something is good, well, I haven't read the full extent of Goldman's translations, but it's something called the Sthali Pulaka Nyaya, where you're cooking rice in a bowl, and how do you know whether it's cooked or not? You take a few grains out, see if they're soft. If they're soft, the rice is cooked. So we take some sample verses, we compare them with the Gita Press translations and also some other translations like that of Griffith, like that of Hari Prasad Shastri, and we see where there are discrepancies, where Goldman's translation does not capture the full essence or makes a mistake and other translations do not. And then we see why I consider the Gita Press translations to be more reliable and more accurate.
So before we get into the actual evidence that you'll present, tell us why Robert Goldman is a very important target. I mean, he's not just some trivial scholar.
Sure. So Robert Goldman is indeed a very tall scholar, and I would say he's probably the Bhishma Pitama of Western academia today. Sheldon Pollock started his career with Robert Goldman I think he did the Ayodhya Kanda, which right. Robert Goldman
was the editor.
So, the Brockingtons and the Goldmans both are considered authoritative in the academia. Recently, there was this controversy where Audrey Truschke did some really bad translations on Twitter. And then as a defense, she showed that, look, this is what Goldman has done.
So Goldman...
So all the discussion was around, this is what Goldman has done.
So it must be correct.
So it must be true.
Yeah, so Goldman is, excuse the punch, the gold standard. That's the so once you can quote your work supporting aligned with Goldman, then the proof is done. That's how the Western Academy
works. What is more
works.
problematic is that once we quote Goldman, people expect that you don't need to check the original.
This is very interesting.
You don't need to check the original Sanskrit. You don't need to check the Sanskrit commentaries. You don't need to look at Hindi translations.
It's the final word.
Yes. So which I have a problem with. No scholar is beyond criticism. No scholar is beyond question. Even in our Indian tradition, commentators, they contradict each other. They say why this person is wrong, And this is why he's wrong.
So what we are doing is not an insult. This is part of our Indian tradition to go write critiques. And you know, the interesting thing is, there was this thing in the press, in the news, that Gita Press is going out of business. And so there's also an assault on Gita Press. At the airport shops in Delhi, there's a bestseller published in India on Gita Press, and it talks about how it's Hindu nationalism, it's saffron, really an attack on Gita Press. And so tell us about this attack on Gita Press.
Yeah. So firstly, Gita Press is not closing down. That was a rumor.
Yeah.
There was some labor unrest there, most likely fomented by some leftist trade unions. It's all sorted out. Gita Press is a tremendous publication house. For years, they have brought out books after books, titles after titles. Their scale is massive.
So you should support Gita Press.
Any major title they bring out, they print 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, 5 lakhs copies. Their price is very reasonable. Their publication quality is second to none. Their printing machines are from Germany. So Gita Press is not only a reliable publication house, but it's also very large scale, very important, and it's in a way it's the torch bearer of our texts. It reaches so many languages. It publishes in Tamil, Telugu, Bengali, Malayalam, Marathi.
Which is why, for the Western Indologists, it would be a strategic move to topple Gita Press with Western substitutes, Western scholars considered to be more authentic, better, and that's where Goldman fits in. Because Goldman, as you will point out, makes has several issues, in several places he gives translations and interpretations completely different from Gita Press. And if Goldman is considered sort of the benchmark and the reliable resource, and Gita Press, through one means or another, they're trying to put it out of business or or move it aside, it would be a very big blow to us if they were successful.
I think also the attacks on Gita Press are a part of this, the leftist propaganda, which tries to see everything as Manuvadi. So everything that is pro-Hindu is Manuvadi. So Gita Press is Manuvadi. It's anti-women, it's anti-Shudras, and so it needs to go out of business. It needs to be attacked. So it's all the Breaking India forces at work.
Good. So with this preamble, we're going to go through some of the translation problems. And the whole series, this mini-series, is on Goldman's work on Ramayana, which is very, very important.
Let's begin with the first, the very beginning, as you know.
The methodology. You want.
Sure. So before we start, let's see what I see as the critical elements of a good translation. In Sanskrit, the word is called anuvada. And anuvada literally means saying something again or saying something later. Anuvadanam, anuvadaha. So an anuvad can be from Sanskrit into Sanskrit. Because you can say the same thing again in Sanskrit in different words and explain it better. So in that sense, even the commentaries can be considered anuvada. Or an anuvad can be from Sanskrit into Hindi or into English. Now, what does an accurate anuvad from Sanskrit require? In my opinion, 4 things are very important. One is getting the right anvaya. Anvaya is the correct ordering of words. Now, many times in Sanskrit, the order does not matter, but that's not always true. Sometimes the order of the words and what word is connected with what word is very important and can lead to a different interpretation. So anvaya, in fact, a lot of publications by Gita Press give the anvaya and then the anuvada. The second thing is called adhyahara, or it's what is known as supplying of ellipses. So when Arjuna says in the Gita, karishye vachanam tava, what he means is aham tava vachanam karishye, I will act as you say.
Implied.
So what is not said by the speaker but is implied, so we bring in those words and put them in the translation. So that is called adhyahara. The third important thing is to get the right shabdartha, the correct word meanings. When you translate a word, the meaning has to be attested either by authentic koshas, dictionaries like Amara Kosha or Vaijayanti Kosha or Vishwa Kosha or Medani Kosha, or by grammar. So you either use the grammar to arrive at meaning of a word or use an established kosha. And then finally, the Vyakaranam or the Sanskrit grammar to get the right sense of who's the agent, who's the object, who's the means, what comes first, what comes later. So knowledge of all these four things is very important. And a very, very useful saying by Malinath, the great commentator on Kalidasa's works and some other great works. He writes in the beginning of his commentaries, Namulam likhyate kinchin nanapekshitam uchyate. Nothing is written without a base. Nothing is written without having a sound foundation, without it being in the original. And nothing is said which is unexpected. That, in my view, is a very good standard for judging an anuvada, which is if there's something is said which is not there in the original, or something which is said which is unexpected, then there are problems.
So you will apply this standard in evaluating
some of the verses that
Goldman's
Goldman
Anuvad
and the other scholars in the series, Ramayana series, have translated.
So let's start.
So as Julie Andrews sang in The Sound of Music, let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. We start at Goldman's translation of Balakanda, the first book of the Ramayana, and the very first verses. Now, there is a maxim in Sanskrit which is Prathama grase makshika pataha. When you're eating, when you set out to eat, and when you take the first morsel of food, we Indians, we like to eat with our hands. You take the first morsel and then a fly falls. So are you going to be happy eating? Yeah, they're going to be...
So if the start is bad,
yeah,
you'll reject that.
Yeah, if the start is bad, it gives me a lot of discomfort.
But I'll change the analogy a little bit, if you don't mind. Let's say it's not that when you picked it up, the fly fell, which means originally it was okay. Actually, when you picked it up, there's a fly already there.
Sure.
That means that the whole thing is bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if the fly fell, maybe this morsel no good, but rest of it is okay.
Right.
What you are finding with Goldman is that the fly sits in the very first verse.
Or probably there are a lot of flies around in the house when they keep falling.
So let's look at the first fly.
Sure. So we start with the first verse, which goes Tapaswadhyaya niratam tapasvi vagvidam varam naradam paripapracha valmikir munipungavam. This is the style of Pandit Sri Ramaghanapati, which is very metrical. So Valmiki says, he writes Vagvidam varam to describe Narada, which translates as the foremost or the chief among those who are eloquent or those who know speech. So we look at Gita Press translation. Gita Press says, Vidwano me shresht. In English they say, the foremost of those skilled in expression. What does Hari Prasad Shastri says? The most eloquent of men. So there's a sense of superlative. Vacham vidanti te vagvidah, tesham varaha vagvidam vara, tam vagvidam varam. That's how we understand in Sanskrit. Superlative. Let's look at Goldman's translation. He says, Valmiki, the ascetic, questioned the eloquent Narada. Where's the superlative? So he has missed out a very important word, varam. So I have to say it's an error of omission.
So he brings it down.
If you omit a word in the translation, as a result of which you bring down the superlative into just a positive, I say it's an error.
Yes.
And it's not what everybody does. If Shastri can get it right, if Gita Press English can get it right, Goldman also can get it right. He should have got it right. Fine. So that's the first one. Now let's see another one in this verse, which is, the word is Muni Pungavam, again to describe Narada. Now, what does Gita Press say? Muni Vara, again, the best among the Munis. What does Gita Press say in English? The chief of the hermits. What does Hari Prasad Shastri says? Chief among the Munis. And what does Goldman say? Bull among sages.
Bull among sages.
Yes. So he's taking the literal meaning of Pungava, which is a bull, but we'll see how it is not the case here. So, Pungava does mean the bull. However, when the word occurs at the end of a compound, it means the best.
Okay.
And that's cited by, it's supported by the Amar Kosha, which says Suruttara Pade Vyagra Pungava Varshava Kunjara Simha Shardula Nagadhyah Pumsi Shresthartha Gochara. If the words Vyagra, Pungava, Rishabha, Kunjara, Simha, Shardula, Naga, if these words come at the end of a compound, they mean Shresht.
So he doesn't even know his grammar, because that's a rule of grammar.
And I see, like, if he reads Muni Pungava, he'll translate as bull among sages. If he reads Muni Shardula, he will translate as tiger among sages. Whereas as per Sanskrit sources, as per Sanskrit commentaries, they all say the best among sages, because that's the meaning when it comes at the end of a compound.
So this playing with, taking liberty, too much poetic license in translating.
Maybe he's trying to be too literal.
Yeah.
But that's not how Sanskrit has ever been interpreted.
He doesn't have the sense that the Sanskrit expert ought to have.
I would expect him to say chief among sages and not bull among sages or lion among sages or tiger among sages. If you look at other translations, that's how they do it. If you look at Sanskrit commentaries, that's how they interpret it. So if he's making a departure and is saying no, Muni Shardula is different from Muni Pungava, I'm not convinced. And in fact, the word Pungav itself, even without being a part of a compound, also means Shrestha. So there's a citation in the Ramayana Shiromani Tika from Vishwakosha, which says Budhe cha Pungava Shresthe Vrishabhe Vishajam Vare. So Pungava means a wise man, Pungava means the best, Pungava means a bull, and Pungava means the a foremost physician, Vishajam Vare. So the word also means, even when it's not a part of the compound. So here the meaning is the chief of the sages or the foremost of the munis. And I would not say bull among sages. It sounds very odd to read to me. And I would say anapekshitam, unexpected. The Malinath's. Okay. Now we go to the second verse, which goes like this. Konasvin sampratam loke gunavan kasya viryavan dharmajnascha kritajnascha satyavakyo dridhavratah. Now here there's a very important word, which is kritajnya, or also pronounced kritagya in certain languages. And it's a very popular word in Sanskrit. It's a very popular word in many languages. In Hindi, we say kritagyata gyapana for vote of thanks. We say, Main aapka kritagya hu, I am grateful to you. So a word which is very old in Sanskrit, exists in multiple languages, and this word is yoga rudhi. It has an established meaning by convention. And what is that meaning? Kritam kritopakaram janati iti kritajnyaha. Literally, somebody who knows what is done. Somebody who knows a favor that is done to him or her. Somebody who remembers favors done to him or her. That is a kritagya person, kritajnya person. This is the sense in the three major commentaries, Bhushana, Tilaka, Shiromani. This is the sense in Gita Press. This is the sense in Griffith, who says, of grateful mind, in the 19th century translation. This is the sense in Hariprasad Shastri. This is the Gita Press Hindi translation says, Upakar manene wala, which is somebody who acknowledges a favor. The Gita Press English translation says, who is conscious of services done. Beautiful translation. Now what does Goldman say? Goldman says, for dharmajnascha and kritajnascha, he says, who knows both what is right and how to act upon it.
Which is nothing to do with that.
Which is nothing to do with it.
It's not just a change in emphasis like the previous example, but this is like a different idea.
This is a different idea, and in fact, Pollock builds on this idea and makes a similar mistake in the Ayodhya Kanda. So
he just read this guy and
maybe he's misled by Goldman's incorrect translation. So there was some time ago, there was a big discussion on the Bharatiya Vidvat Parishad list, which I started on this topic. Now, in fact, even in the academia, so there's Alf Hiltebeitel, who wrote in 2011, he pointed this out. He says, Kritajnya can quite ordinarily mean grateful. So Valmiki's first doublet can be translated as, who knows dharma and is grateful, rather than who knows dharma and how to act upon it. So even in the academia, it's been questioned.
So the idea of gratitude is gone, right? In Goldman.
And Goldman, he may say that Kritajnya means something, he's interpreting in a different way, but even in the Ramayana, even in Valmiki's word, there is enough evidence to show that this conventional meaning of grateful was present even in that time. So there is an example in the Kishkindha Kanda, which goes, Upakarena virohi pratikarena yujyate akritajnyo pratikrito hanti sattvatam manah, where there is clear that Kritagya is somebody who considers an upakar or a favor done to him. It is clear in the Gita Press Hindi translation, it is clear in the Sanskrit commentaries on this verse. And since akritagya is somebody who does not pay back. Kritagya is somebody who pays back or who is grateful. Another example, so Goldman should be aware of these because he's spent his life on Ramayana, and I'm sure he would have read these verses, but I don't know why he ignored them. So there's another one in the Kishkindha Kanda where Valmiki says about Ram is talking about I don't recall who's talking about here, but probably about Sugriva. He says purva-pakaram smarata kritagnyena visheshatah. So Kritagya is somebody who remembers a favor done to him. The Vachaspatyam, an authoritative Sanskrit dictionary, says Kritagya is somebody who knows what is done, what favor is done to him or her. It's a very standard word. It has a very conventional meaning. And I find it strange that Goldman has translated as how to act on dharma, because the sense is already captured in the word dharmajna. Somebody who knows dharma also knows how to act on it.
Right.
It's not like I know dharma, but I don't know how to act on dharma.
Right. There's another word for it, and this word has a different purpose.
Yeah. So why could Goldman's translation be wrong? I can only guess. It's possibly due to the incorrect meaning, and this is very important. The word has an incorrect meaning cited in the Monier-Williams Sanskrit dictionary.
That's very important because that's considered sort of the classic.
Yeah. So Monier-Williams under Kritagnya, he says, the first meaning he gives, knowing what is right, correct in conduct. And he gives a citation from the Mahabharata, which is 12.1046. Interestingly, this meaning was absent from the first edition of Monier-Williams, which came out in 1872. But it's present in the 1899 edition. So 27 years later, he added this meaning. What happened in between? In between came the St. Petersburg dictionary, the Sanskrit German, the colossal dictionary in 1879 by Bottling. And Monier-Williams copied shamelessly this entry from that dictionary.
There is an ecosystem of Westerners relying on each other. That's what it means.
And
I mean, Goldman copies from this guy, Monier-Williams copying from the German dictionary, now Truschke copying from Goldman, and Pollock copying.
So the German dictionary says, das Rechte kennen, which is exactly same as knowing what is right, and gives exactly the same translation, which the standard dictionary copied, just translated into English. In fact, even this entry was absent in the original Bertling and Roth dictionary in 1855. I looked up the citation, 12.1046. There are many occurrences of the word Kritagnya in the 12th Parva, the Shanti Parva. None of them is close to chapter 104. So where is this citation from? I could not trace it. This entry in both dictionaries is incorrect, has to be deemed incorrect. It goes against the established meaning. The citation is not traceable. So I have to say that it's an error in those dictionaries.
And it's propagated into...
It's probably, that's where Goldman probably got the sense of this word from. So, as I said, the word dharmajna already covers the both meanings, knows dharma and knows how to act on dharma. Kritagnya means grateful. Goldman's translation is at odds with the tradition, is at odds with Griffith, with Hari Prasad Shastri, with Gita Press English translation. And I have to say, yes, it's not correct. Now, moving on to the third one. So we looked at the first verse, the second verse, now let's come to the third.
Every one of the first 5 verses got some error.
Got a fly.
Got a fly in it, yeah.
So the third verse goes, Charitrena chako yuktah sarva bhuteshu ko hitah vidvan kah samarthascha kaschaika priyadarshanaha. Valmiki is poetic. He says, Kaschaika Priyadarshana. Who is the only one who's great to look at? Who's Priyadarshan? The Ekmatra Priyadarshan kaun hai? Who's the only one who's a pleasure to behold? Right? Now the word Ek there means the only one. Ek means Aditya. Ek has many meanings. The Amar Kosh says Eke Mukhyanya Kevala. Here the meaning is Kevala. Ek means Ekmatra, as we say in Hindi. So let's look at the Hindi translation. Gita Press says एकमात्र प्रियदर्शन अथवा एकमात्र सुंदर for eka priyadarshana. What does the Gita Press English translation say? Who has a singularly lovable appearance. So they are saying singularly ekmatra. Hari Prasad Shastri also makes this error. He says simply handsome. So he's bringing down the superlative to just a positive. What does Goldman says? And a pleasure to behold. Again, the sense of superlative is gone. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm translating Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, and where Antony describes the wound given to Caesar by Brutus. Shakespeare writes, this was the most unkindest cut of all. Now, if I'm translating in Hindi, shall I say Nirday Vartha? The whole superlative sense is gone. Shakespeare says the most unkindest cut of all,
which is want to put it,
which is like, I would say, Sarvadhik Nirdaytam Vartha.
Right.
You know, the most unkind of the most unkind.
Right.
And you cannot bring down a superlative like this. It's poetry. The effect is all gone. So why did Goldman miss the word eka, when in fact he has referred so many Sanskrit commentaries, and each Sanskrit commentary gives so much of emphasis on this word eka. They say it's advitiya or it's something else, and different shades. But you are ignoring a word. It's an error of omission, and you're bringing down the superlative to just a positive. I would say it is an error. Well, fact's a fact, it's an error.
It is.
Let's move on to verse number 4. Valmiki asks, Atmavan ko jita krodho dyutiman ko nasuyakaha kasya vibhyati devascha jato roshasya samyuge. Now, there are two things here. One is, Valmiki's word is jita krodha. Jita krodha is somebody who has conquered anger. The Hindi translation says, krodh ko jeetne wala. The word jeet also comes from the root ji in jijaye in Sanskrit. And the Gita Press English translation says, who has conquered anger. Goldman says, who has subdued his anger. There's a fine difference.
Yes.
Conquer is a much stronger word than subdue.
Yes.
You can temporarily subdue something, you can control something.
Conquer means you defeat it.
Conquer means defeat it completely.
Right.
So, see this nuance. Conquered anger versus subdued anger. What does Hari Prasad Shastri says? Slow to anger. Again, I don't agree with this. It's not slow to anger, that's not the sense here. So I would say even Hari Prasad Shastri gets it wrong here. The second thing I'm concerned about is Goldman says, who's both judicious and free from envy for Dyutiman ko nasuyakaha. Now initially I thought he's probably mistranslated Dyutiman as judicious, because Dyutiman means having splendor or brightness. Dyotate anaya iti dyutihi. Dhyutirastyasya iti dyutiman. However, later I realized that the critical edition has a different reading. The critical edition reads matiman, which is what Goldman has translated. However, even here, matiman is not judicious. There's a difference. The word judicious, and I'm quoting the concise Oxford Dictionary, it says having or done with good judgment, sensible. Sometimes it's used in the sense of being careful. Matiman, on the other hand, means having intellect or knowledge.
Hey.
So, mati has three primary meanings in Sanskrit. One is jnanam or knowledge, because it comes from the root mana jnane, manyate, knows, same root. It also means buddhi or intellect, which is attested to by the Amar Kosha. And it also means ichha or desire. So, this is also attested because Panini has used this word in the sense of ichha in the sutra Mati Buddhi Pujarthebhyascha, and the Kashika says Mati Rihe Ichha. Mati means ichha here. These three primary meanings: desire, knowledge, intellect. So Matiman is somebody you can say either has knowledge or has intellect or has a desire. There's no sense of good judgment there. In fact, there's a word for good judgment in Sanskrit. It's viveka.
Okay.
Somebody who's judicious or having good judgment would be called vivekin.
So if that was what they wanted to say, they would have said it that way.
Yeah, so Valmiki would have used the word viveki or some similar word if he meant good judgment. Mati is the faculty.
Right.
And judgment is the result of that faculty.
So this is important because our system is so subtle. There's such subtle shades of meaning, which in our tradition is very important. Lot of emphasis on accuracy, precision, and the West says that they are more accurate, scientific, precise. But when they are looking at our works, our own writers are so precise compared to what the Westerners are able to interpret as. They're taking too much liberty.
When you say judicious, the word has a positive sense to it.
Yes.
Showing good judgment. Matiman, on the other hand, it is, yes, it is positive, but in a different way. It is somebody who's intelligent. So somebody who's intelligent could have good judgment or could have bad judgment.
Could have bad judgment, yes.
In fact, you have words like sumati or kumati, somebody with a good mati or a bad mati.
Right, right.
And I would say Dashakumara Charitam, a work, has a word called Viveka Shunya Mati. A mati which is without Viveka. Or rather, somebody having intelligence without judgment.
Yes.
So, Matiman is not judicious. So, even with the critical edition, I'm not convinced with Goldman's translation. Let's move on to the next verse, the fifth one. So, this one goes, Etadichamyaham shrotum param kautuhalam hime maharshetam samarthosi jnatum evam vidham naram. Now, Valmiki says, you are capable of knowing such a man. He describes these positive qualities and says, you are capable of knowing such a man. Jnatum samartha asi. Let's say what Gita Press says in Hindi. आप ऐसे पुरुष को जानने में समर्थ हैं. I can fully relate to the meaning. Let's say what Gita Press says in English. You are capable of knowing such a man. Perfect. What does Goldman say? You must know of such a man. That's different.
That's completely different.
So
yes.
you see, I'll show what the difference is. When Valmiki says you're capable of knowing such a man,
that doesn't mean you actually know one.
What Valmiki says is either you know, or if you don't know,
you have the capacity.
You have the capacity to know. You can. He's a Muni, so he can meditate and find out instantly.
It's like my gym coach says you are capable of lifting more weights, but that doesn't mean I'm actually doing it.
Right. So
right.
You see, these are important differences.
Right.
The whole word samartha, the sense of the word samartha is absent from Goldman's translation.
So the potential versus the actuality is being confused.
So you must know is like, if I say you must know this, I assume you know this.
Yeah.
If I say you're capable of knowing it,
right,
that means
I have the capacity.
Either you know, or if you don't know, you have the capacity to
I should go and learn. Right.
So, again, Gita Press Hindi, Gita Press English are better than both Goldman and Hariprasad Shastri in this respect. Now, we've looked at verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, verse 5.
This is a very important slide where he has all 5 books.
Yeah.
So tell us about this.
So
this is a comparative evaluation of
based on the first 5 verses.
Yes.
I looked at these 3 or 4 different translations: Gita Press Hindi, Gita Press English, Hariprasad Shastri, and Robert Goldman. What are my conclusions? My conclusions are there are many problems. I find many problems in Goldman's translation. I also find many problems in Hariprasad Shastri's translation. Gita Press, far fewer issues, more accurate, more reliable, and more faithful to the original.
Good.
So that's my conclusion.
That's the conclusion.
I grew up reading the Gita Press Hindi translation. That's the standard I'm used to. And I cannot say that Goldman has that standard. Goldman's translation doesn't have that standard. I cannot say that Shastri's translation has that standard.
So I hope Princeton University Press people will watch this and have more respect for Gita Press. I hope that, the Western Academy often thinks that unless it's been peer reviewed by Westerners and published by a Western academic press, it does not constitute academic publishing. This is true. This is when they're evaluating people for promotions and for, getting them certified and all that stuff, tenured and so on. They look at certain presses as being legitimate and others not so. So Indian press are not considered academic grade.
I'll tell you what, there was a great Sanskrit scholar and a saint in our country, Karpatra Swami Hariharananda Saraswati. He was not university educated. He didn't have any peer publications. He wrote so many Sanskrit words. He was actually called Abhinava Shankaracharya. His works were edited by professors of Sampurnanand Sanskrit University. Because they saw, here is true knowledge. He wrote an enlightening commentary on the Shukla Yajurveda's Madhyandini Samhita, which is by far one of the best commentaries on our Vedic works which I have ever seen. And it was edited by Rajeshwar Shastri Musalgaonkar. It was edited by so many academic scholars in India. So it need not, if a publication is not from a university or from a traditional source in India, it doesn't mean that it's not of good quality.
Right.
In fact, with Gita Press, or with publications like I see Chaukhamba. Chaukhamba does brilliant publications in Sanskrit. There's Pandit Ishwar Chandra whose works have been published. Govind Prasad Sharma's works have been published. Sanskrit Bharati has very good standard of publications. Sanskrit Bharati, which Pollock likes to hate.
Yeah, he makes fun of it.
Yeah. In fact, Pushpa Dikshit, one of the tallest scholars of Sanskrit Vyakarana today in India, publishes extensively through Sanskrit Bharati. George Cardona has great respect for Pushpa Dikshit.
He's a more solid, honest person.
I once had a private exchange with George Cardona, and we were discussing something written in Pushpa Dikshit's, or Mataji as she is called, her books. And I remember a line that George Cardona wrote to me. He said, I first agreed with Pushpa Dikshit because of the immense respect that I have for her. Now here's a scholar who's respected by George Cardona. She's published by Sanskrit Bharati.
Yeah. Very good. So we'll be back with more evaluation of Goldman by our friend Nityanand Misra. Thank you for doing a great job. I think you're doing a tremendous service because you are sort of poking into this absolute credibility, absolute adhikar and authority of certain taller than, larger than life Western scholars by bringing them down and saying they're subject to error. And here are some first five verses have things that are either wrong or questionable or not up to the standard. So we'll be back. Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here and also hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified. To donate, please click this button.